Essence of Eternity. Chapter 5, Revolution, Part 1. After the brief conversation that Livon had with Gregorio in Eretria, this returned to Shining to complete his stay. When he arrived at the entrance, 2 sentinels received him, letting him pass without question or doubt. Livon walked towards his home and entered the room where his family had dinner. In this room were his sister Nozomi and his father Zil, who were having dinner in absolute silence. Livon sat with them and accompanied them, both dinner meetings and any other. Most of the time silence was always present. At the end of dinner, the family prepared to sleep and turned off all their lights like most houses in the kingdom. During the night, Livon thought deeply about Gregorio's words, as he promised him that he would accept an alliance with his kingdom once he is the next king of Shining. He had a clear goal, but he did not know what he should do to reach that goal. It was not fear that dominated him, only restlessness, for now there was no need to act desperately. He could just wait until he was next in line to the throne to guide his people in the right direction. Even though this was going to taking a long time, was the easiest way to come to power without conflict. The Shining Society was always considered a closed and conservative kingdom. They dedicated themselves solely to serving their own kingdom, so negotiations for weapons or raw materials were never negotiated for any reason, and those caught negotiating these items would be punished by death. Zil was always strict with the order and discipline of his people. For him it was the most important thing in his society. His laws forced his people to be turned into warriors from a very young age to protect his kingdom in any circumstance. By law, men had to be the main protectors of the kingdom and those in charge of carrying out murder services or carrying out various jobs, mainly heavy jobs. Women were also trained to be warriors from a young age, and when they grew up they were given the freedom to take 2 different roles in society, being housewives or warriors in the service of Shining. This included working in agriculture or crafts while in service. Livang's sister, Nozomi, took the role of being a warrior in the service of Shining and swore allegiance to her father, whom she did not question any decision he made. As was routine in the morning, Livang and Nozomi had the responsibility of cultivating bonsai and keeping it in good condition at all times. While Nozomi was working on one of these, Livang said, "Do you think our father's decision was the best one in rejecting a plant alliance with the other kingdoms?" Nozomi responded by saying, "We don't need to question our father's actions. He knows what is best for the kingdom," Livang said. "Making an alliance with the other kingdoms would prevent us from being forced to kill to maintain our society." Nozomi wasn't surprised by Livang's thought, as they had always trusted each other to talk about their father's decisions or what they should do with the kingdom in the future. Nozomi replied, "Our law is clear and strict. We cannot share anything with other kingdoms. You must understand that. We swore allegiance to our father, so we must not question his decisions." She listened to him, but she didn't want to support her ideal. Livang couldn't convince Nozomi to change, nor any of his people, since his leader always protected them, gave them laws that kept the kingdom of Shining away from outside bad customs. The only one who saw his father's tradition badly was him, and he could not do anything but accept what his father demanded. But Livang did not want to give up. He wanted to fight for his ideal even when no one listened to him, but he had to be patient, to act. Shining was a kingdom that was considered a gold mine, as it had technology and raw materials that other kingdoms wanted to obtain. For this reason Shining had sentinels and scouts watching around the kingdom almost all day long, to avoid any type of infiltration with the intent to spy on or steal your resources. Each scout given the task of guarding the exteriors of the kingdom was personally chosen by Zil, and Livang was tasked with conducting routine scouting to the north at night. While he was riding his horse at low speed, the horse suddenly felt something was threatening him. Livang did not understand the horse's fear, so he decided to get off and see what was ahead. When he investigated, he could see that there was a snake, the reason why the horse did not want to go any further. Livang tried to get rid of the snake to continue the path, but when he tried he was ambushed by some men who surrounded him. They raised their spears and their weapons, swords, to corner Livang, and he braced himself to start the fight. Just at that moment a man behind the stranger spoke, saying, "Calm down, just keep an eye out." Livang looked at the stranger's face and asked, "If you seek to enter the realm of..." The stranger interrupted him, saying, "It's nice to meet you, Your Majesty. I apologize for interrupting your surveillance. My name is Durant and I am the mercenary leader of Abian." "Don't worry, I just came to talk." Livang responds, "Speak." Durant tells him, "As you know, our territory was attacked some time ago. Our casualties were heavy, and since the enemy had no losses in those attacks, we were forced to hide and be afraid before her return. I must take action, and that is why I am here, not to ask your young kingdom for help. Live on. I have come to ask you to talk about business. Live on, for obvious reasons, had to reject the deal in case the mercenary asked for resources or weapons from his kingdom. Since no inhabitant of Shining should make such a deal with any kingdom, this one tells him, I'm sorry that your territory has been attacked by those beasts, but the kingdom of Shining has nothing to do with your situation. We provide services of murder. We do not trade our resources. At the end of these words, Liv On puts her sword away and turns around to try to get on her horse and leave, but Durant with a disappointed face responds by saying, I understand. In that case I will have to accept the no and send a message to his father about his suspicious visit to Eretria. Liv On stands frozen for a moment and looks at the ground in silence, before turning his head and saying, Eretria required a service from Shining, that's why the kings of those kingdoms visited us. Hearing this, Durant laughs heartily and then says, Young Liv On, I am not a fool. I know that your visit to Eretria had a personal purpose, and no matter how much you want to hide it, you did not have authorization to go to Eretria and perform a service. My men were guarding the outside of Shining after our territory suffered attacks from Alkmaar. Our intention was to try to infiltrate his kingdom and steal something valuable. It would be difficult, but after that meeting his suspicious visit to Eretria caught our attention. I know that his father would not be happy if he found out about his actions or could even be executed for treason. If you want to leave and ignore my words, your father will know what you did. Liv On had no escape. He knew perfectly well that his actions would be severely punished and he had no choice but to accept Durant's threat. That's when Liv On told him. So, what do you want? Durant said with a smile, you will accompany us to our camp that is near here. There we can talk without any of your companions seeing you, but before hand over the weapons you bring. Liv On with an angry face hands over his sword and his additional weapons. Left with no choice, she accompanies the mercenaries to his camp. Upon arriving at the camp, Durant invites Liv On to enter his tent and chat. Liv On enters with no choice and Durant says, do you want to sit down? Liv On just watches him with a serious face without saying anything. Seeing the silence, Durant said, I'll go straight to the point. Your kingdom has raw materials and technology that I want to obtain. I want you to bring me samples of both. Liv On replies, why don't you just ask me for a shipment? Durant looks at him and says, sounds tempting, but a man like me always wants to see what he's going to buy. Liv On replied, so if I give you those samples, will you leave me alone? Durant with a smiling look tells him, that will depend on what you bring to our territory. A surprised Liv On says, your territory? I cannot travel there without leaving suspicions. Durant responds, calm down young Liv On. I will give you facilities so that you can take the merchandise without arousing suspicion. I will request a murder service, and when the message reaches Shining you must offer yourself to fulfill that service. If you fail in the attempt, I will request it again until you are the one who shows up. What do you say? Will you accept? Liv On watches Durant for a moment as he extends his arm to wait for him to shake his hand. He knew full well that if he was caught making this deal, he would be publicly executed in his kingdom, but if he decided not to do it anyway, this would kill him. Could lead to death. Both paths led to the same destination. He had no choice and he decided to accept the deal for his survival. Liv On shook Durant's hand and Durant mentioned that the message was going to be sent tomorrow. With nothing more to say, Durant asked her to return to his kingdom before some of his companions suspected his absence. Liv On immediately left the tent and got on his horse to finish his scouting routine. He had arrived a little late to the kingdom and the sentry at the entrance asked him the reason, to which Liv On said, my horse had a problem on the way. Apparently a snake was nearby. It took a while to find it so my horse could move on. I apologize for the delay. The sentry is convinced by Liv On's testimony and lets him through. During that night Liv On felt a chill that he had never had before, and it wasn't because of the mercenaries who blackmailed him to force him to trade with them, it was because of his father. The people of Shining were always more afraid of Zil than outsiders. According to his law, those who commit treason against Shining would be publicly exhibited and then be tried and punished by cutting off their head. For Zil, any violation of the law could only be paid for with blood, and this was what its inhabitants feared, making a mistake. The next day, in the afternoon, after Zil and his children ate, a messenger arrived to request a murder service with additional details. The person in charge of carrying out the murder had to appear in the Abidjan territory to receive precise instructions. Zil accepted and gathered some warriors to communicate what was requested by the messenger. Regularly this type of work was entrusted to outstanding and experienced warriors, in order to be able to face any type of situation without forgetting the main objective. Finishing explaining the mission to his warriors, Zil looked at everyone, and Nozomi, who seemed willing to take on the job, tries to raise her hand, but Livong intervenes saying, "Father, I offer myself to carry out this mission. I don't want my sister puts herself at risk out there." Saying this, Nozomi with a serious tone says, "Are you saying that I can't protect myself?" Livong tries to calm her down, but her father didn't want to hear arguments at the table, so he decided to entrust the task to Livong. Nozomi didn't say anything after of this decision, and Livong prepared to travel overnight to the territory of the Abijans. Livong had traveled approximately 3 times outside of Xining, and the furthest he had gone was Eritrea. However, in this case, he would be traveling into hostile territory that he had not explored in previous missions. Prior to the trip, his father visited him and told him, "You are about to travel to a mercenary territory. You should always be aware of any possible threat. One of the explorers will guide you to the vicinity of the territory. Finish this task and return to Livong. I trust your ability." Livong thanks him and gets on his horse to start the journey to the territory of the Abiyan. As he rode alongside the explorer, he could see the illuminated city of Gibraltar in the distance. It was a pleasant sight, and Livong was amazed to see the prosperity of the kingdom, a kingdom that protected and shared everything it had. Livong was interrupted by the scout, who asked him to pay attention to the road. He apologized, and they continued without further distraction. Beyond Gibraltar was the territory of the Abijan, who awaited the arrival of the warrior who would fulfill his assassination service. When he was almost close, the explorer told him, "My lord, the Abijan territory is close. I will wait for you here once I have the precise instructions." Livong immediately advances with his horse until he reaches the entrance of the territory. He was pointed with spears as he approached, and Livong said, "I am in charge of carrying out the assassination service requested by your leader. Let me pass to do my job." Upon hearing this, the 2 guards let him pass and guard him inside. Upon entering Durant's workspace, he manages to observe many things inside him that he was unaware of, such as food and weapons that he apparently obtained from other kingdoms for the benefit of his territory. Looking around him, Durant said, "If you're interested in buying anything you see here, I'll be willing to negotiate for a fair price." Livong immediately refuses, handing over the promised samples from their previous meeting. Upon opening the shipment, Durant observed unknown plants, some fruits, and the most curious thing was a small bow, which the ninjas used as a ranged weapon. In this way they could eliminate enemies without getting so close to their objective. Durant was amazed at its unique design and said, "What do you call this weapon?" Livong said, "Ghost Blade." Clearly Durant was very interested in keeping this weapon for the benefit of his people, and although he also examined the plants and other items that Livong brought, the Ghost Blade was what caught his attention the most. While Durant was browsing, Livong looked around again and managed to see some reddish fruits that caught his attention. One of these fruits was in the shape of an apple. When he got a little closer, Durant said, "I see that you are interested in knowing more about that fruit." Livong said, "Is it some kind of apple?" Durant gets up from his seat laughing and then says, "No, young Livong, it is not an apple. According to what the merchant mentioned, they call this fruit Garnata. It is a fruit with a sweet and sour flavor. We traded it some time ago in other lands. Do you wish to try it?" Livong, although he refuses, can't help but be curious about its taste. Durant doesn't think about it anymore and opens the fruit and then gives half to Livong. Tasting it confirms what Durant said. It was a fruit with a sweet and sour taste. Durant says, "Since you brought valuable samples from your kingdom, perhaps I will let you take some of them." Livong responds by exclaiming, "Maybe?" Durant goes on to say, "Yes, everything will depend on you. You brought me valuable items. If you accept, you can take some of these fruits with you." Although it seemed like a fair deal, Livong said, "Thanks for the offer, but I will only accept. Give him the samples I brought, nothing more." Durant looks at him with disappointment and hands him a bag with the payment for the false service required, and then says, "All right, that would be all for now, young Livong. Return to your kingdom. I will let you know when I need your help again." Livong, without saying anything, says goodbye and turns to leave. While walking, one of the guards who was guarding him hits him hard, knocking him to the ground. He can only hear a few voices before he becomes unconscious. When he wakes up, he feels disoriented without knowing where he was. When he tries to move, he feels that he is tied to a chair. In front of Livong was Durant, who looked at him with a serious and disappointed face while 4 guards guarded the room they were in. Durant says, "I don't want them to find resentment between us, Livong. If I told you that this wasn't personal, you'll know that I'm telling you the truth." Livong, disoriented, says, "What do you want from me?" Durant stares at him and says, "It's not you I'm looking for, you're just a means to reach my main goal, Zil." Livon said, "My kingdom's actions and assassinations are not personal, we act on the orders of others." Durant says, "That's right, but your kingdom hasn't just dedicated itself to murdering people who may or may not deserve it. Robbery and kidnapping of innocent people." Hearing this, Livon looks at him with doubt. Durant continues saying, "Your father committed a crime and broke a law that he claimed to respect so much." Livon only watches him with a confused face, not knowing what his father had done in the past. Durant told him, he said, "Don't you know? It was a long time ago. At first we didn't understand what was happening. We thought that maybe the witches were responsible for the incident, but some time later we found out what had really happened. Your father received instructions from an unknown man. We never found out who he was. We only know that he was from Alkmaar and his order to Zil was to kidnap more than 60 children between 1 and 5 years old. Your father should have refused that order out of dignity and respect to his law, which stipulates that no inhabitant of Shining should fulfill any murder service or any other request that involves children, much less babies, but he still accepted it and sent his warriors to kidnap children from the different kingdoms, including the Abidjan territory. They took more than 20 children from here. We never found any trace of them, not even their bodies. Whoever was the man who ordered that kidnapping, it doesn't matter. Your father was the main person responsible and must be punished for what he did." Livon is astonished to hear all this, because these actions broke with his father's law, which prohibited when Shining warriors abduct or murder children, and shamefacedly says, "I'm sorry. I didn't know. My people don't know either." Durant replies, "Apologizing isn't going to bring back all those children who were kidnapped and possibly killed, nor will they save your father from the punishment he deserves. We know well what it feels like to lose our children. Your father will also know what he feels and that he can't do anything to save you. Now relax, I'm not going to kill you, at least not for now." Durant leaves the room and goes to another place where the scout who accompanied Livon to reach the mercenaries' territory was located. He had also been captured and was unconscious. Durant wakes him up and tells him, "You will see that your king receives this message and his son's sword as evidence of his capture. He is kidnapped in my territory. If you want to save him, you must send me 5 shipments with unique resources from Shining. You have a day limit. If you comply with my request, your son will return to his kingdom." Upon finishing saying this, Durant unties the explorer and pushes him to send the message to Shining. While this was happening, Livon could only regret the actions that his father had committed against the other kingdoms. Zil, who forced everyone to obey his law, a law that he himself broke. In the morning, Zil was informed of the situation and he was given Livang's sword. His face reflected a lack of concern. Even so, he gathered his warriors to be informed of what happened with Livon. At this meeting, different representatives of his army were present, including Nozomi, who looked more worried than her father when she saw that he had her brother's sword. Zil said, "We have received a message from the Abidjan. They have Livon kidnapped. In exchange for him returning safely, they request 5 shipments of unique resources from Shining, just giving us 1 day to gather everything and send it to the mercenaries' territory." One of his warriors said, "Then what action will you take, sir?" Zil, with a very cold tone, said, "According to our law, no inhabitant of Shining can trade resources or weapons with any outside kingdom." Livon offered to fulfill this mission and risked his life in doing so. "I'm sorry that he can't do anything to help my son. Our resources will never be shared or given to other kingdoms, even if a life depends on it." Everyone in the meeting remained in cold silence after Zil's cold words. No one wanted to oppose their king's decision. After communicating this, Zil asked the explorer previously captured by Durant to send that message of rejection to the Abidjan. The meeting was concluded and the representatives continued their activities normally. As Zil was walking down one of the hallways, Nozomi catches up with him and says, "Father, is that all? Will you let my brother die after he offered to carry out this mission and prevent me from exposing myself to being kidnapped as well?" Zil replies, "I know it is a decision that you will question, accepting to negotiate with the Abidjan and handing over our resources. It would be breaking our law. My decisions are always made for the benefit of the kingdom." Nozomi sadly replies, "Letting my brother die would also be a crime." Zil says, "Your brother will sacrifice himself for us. It has been like that for a long time, Nozomi. We must leave behind our emotions and feelings when it comes to the good of our kingdom. Your brother will be a hero by preventing people from outside from taking advantage of us." Upon finishing saying this, Zil hands Nozomi her brother's sword. She could only look at the sword and mourn its loss. Heartbroken, she accepts his father's decision and stays on the ground without questioning anything else. The Shining scout arrived in the Abidjan territory in the afternoon and delivered the message to Durant. Upon hearing the message, he really wasn't that surprised by Zill's decision and immediately went to visit Livong to talk to him about what his father said. Upon entering the room, he woke up Livong and stood in front of him to tell him, "Your father sent us a message, and honestly, I'm not that surprised. I'm more disappointed because he doesn't love his people or his own children." Livong without understand, he asks about his father's message, to which Durant says, "He does not want to negotiate with us for your life. He prefers to let you die here and keep his valuable resources. Without a doubt, he is a man who does not value anyone's life. He is a pity." Understanding that he would be left to die, Livong accepts his fate and with a sad tone says, "Then, get this over with." For the first time, Durant feels sorry for this man and understands that he will not gain anything from his death. He says, "Well, since your father does not want to negotiate, we will go to the backup plan, and for that I am going to keep you alive," Livong said. "Backup plan? Did you know that my father would reject your request?" Durant says, "No, there was a chance he would decline the deal, but you should always have a backup plan when things don't go your way." Livong questions about his plan, but Durant turns his back on him and leaves him in the dark room guarded by guards. Durant returns to his workspace where the explorer was watched by 2 guards. When he saw Durant arrive, he had a sad face, but when Durant saw him, he said, "Calm down, I haven't killed him yet, but I have a new message for you." The explorer looks at him surprised, and Durant says, "Since your dear king does not want to rescue his son and deliver the demand, I will go to the backup plan. Your king already thinks it is the turn of his people." The explorer, without understanding, looks at him with doubt. Durant writes him a letter to be addressed to the people of Shining. Once the written message is delivered to the explorer, one of the soldiers cuts him with a knife and in this way administers a poison to his body that was going to kill him in a few hours. Durant said, "Recite this message to your people, not to your king. They may prohibit you from speaking to such an extent that the soldiers will intend to silence you, but read it as far as you can, and if you survive, come back here. If you stay, the poison in your body will kill you in a few hours. I will give you the antidote as soon as you return." With an angry face, the explorer says, "What makes you think that I will sacrifice myself for you giving this message?" Durant with a straight face says, "I think you did it for 2 reasons, for Prince Livong and to tell your people the truth." The explorer did not understand what he was getting at and asked for an explanation. Durant told the explorer about the mass kidnappings that his king had agreed to carry out years ago, just as Livong was surprised, because Zill had broken his own law, something that neither the explorer nor his people knew. Despite what Durant said, the explorer doubted his version of his events, since it was also possible that he was lying to conspire against his people. Durant knew that perhaps he would doubt his words, so he showed him evidence that he could not question. This was a written contract, where the king of Shining promised to fulfill the request of a necromancer from Alkmaar, and the signature of both was on the contract, proving that indeed, Zill had been primarily responsible for the kidnapping of more than 60 children. The explorer was amazed to see and read the signed contract. Durant said, "Now do you see it clearly? Your king broke his own law." The scout asks, "Why? Why do you want me to show my people this evidence now? Why didn't you do it sooner?" Durant said, "If I or one of my people showed this evidence to your people, they would never listen to us, but if one of theirs does, then they will get their full attention." In addition, he first wanted to take full advantage of his valuable natural resources, but since his king did not want to negotiate the life of his son, he showed his people that he does not care about anyone's life, only his law. A law that soon his people will know that the same loss. "So tell me, boy, are you willing to send this message and tell your people the truth?" The explorer looks at him with confusion. He was surprised to see such actions committed by his king. He had no doubt that his crime was something aberrational, and after thinking about it for a while, he sighed, took the letter along with the contract, and stood up to go to Shining and deliver the message to his people. Meanwhile, in Shining, Nozomi cries inconsolably in front of her brother's sword, without imagining what she was approaching from her. If you like my content, you can support me by giving me a like, subscribing, and activating notifications. In the next episode, Revolution, second part. Thank you so much.